Ruin.
Suppose I don't.
Hold down, Sonja. I can hold them. Go.
Where is he?
Prepare to be conquered.
I don't want to kill you.
Try it.
That girl. We could have ruled the world together. You're mad!
This place.
Well, hello there. It's Double D coming at you with another fantasy movie video. This is one I think might be inspirational for your D&D game and does not get a lot of love. That movie is 1985's Red Sonja. All right. Stop laughing in the back. I'm serious here. This movie is not great as a whole. The acting is a little wooden, and despite a relatively large budget, it would be $52 million in 2024. The landscapes are a little barren. The kingdoms the characters go through seem to have like 15 people in them. I always think it's important in these types of films to show at least a little bit of civilization to contrast with the savagery and barbarism shown. But apparently they spent all the money on sets and Arnold's salary and couldn't hire any extras. The movie is actually fairly straightforward. It follows the Conan the Barbarian theme of having its main character's family killed and herself put through torture, which only makes her stronger in the end. In this case, the villain is Gedren, played by Sandal Bergman, who was Valeria in Conan the Barbarian. Now, eventually, Sonja finds her way out into the world and trains as a warrior. Now, unfortunately, her surviving sister is a priestess of an order that's tasked to look after a world-breaking talisman, one that only women can touch. Of course, our villain, Gedren, wants this talisman to rule the world, so she attacks and captures it, and starts doing just that. It's up to Sonja, along with a familiar face, if not name, and a couple of sidekicks to get the talisman back and destroy it. Pretty straightforward plot, as I said, but probably a little tired even in its time. But still, as long as the execution is good, you can still tell an enjoyable story with it. The results here, though, are a bit mixed. I would still take this over the LOL so random nature of so many movies these days, especially in the fantasy realm. Its tone isn't quite as dark as Conan the Barbarian, but it is a little darker, I think, than Conan the Destroyer, which was directed by Richard Fleischer, who is also behind the camera here. I think this movie was criticized a little bit too savagely in its time, and it's worth another look. It's not high art by any stretch, but it might not be as bad as you remember. And there's definitely a little inspiration here for D&D players and DMs. Now, I'm going to give you 7 reasons this movie might not be as bad as you remember, or alternatively, is worth you checking out for the first time if you've never seen it. So without further ado, let's get started. Brigitte Nielsen was just a 21-year-old Danish model who found herself flying to Rome to meet with the legendary Dino De Laurentiis to discuss playing Sonja. Obviously, the leggy and beautiful Nielsen was perfect physically to play the character, a character that was created by Robert E. Howard, who also, of course, created Conan, but was really fleshed out a bit more in Marvel Comics during the 1970s. Now, Nielsen was not a natural actress, of course, though this movie did kickstart her career. She's a bit unjustly criticized here for her acting ability, and while she doesn't deserve any awards, her heavy accent actually just plays into the fantasy, barbaric genre in much the way Arnold's did in the first 2 Conan movies. Granted, she doesn't have nearly the charisma of Arnold, but her character is supposed to be even grimmer than Conan in many ways. As a warrior, she looks the part. It's obvious that she stepped off the runway and made an earnest effort to learn swordplay. The scenes where she lowers her guard just a little bit do punctuate her character nicely, especially when she's dealing with Prince Tarn, the child ruler of the city of Hablock, which was destroyed by their mutual enemy Gedrin. Of course, at the end, Sonja, with a little help from her friends, gets to confront the evil queen and set order to the land. A standard arc for movies of this genre, delivered in a fairly straightforward manner. There's not many side adventures, and once the target is put in front of her and her friends, they go after it. And speaking of those friends, Arnold Schwarzenegger sort of received top billing in this movie because by this time he was becoming a legitimate superstar, not just a star. His character's name in Red Sonja is Calidor, but he is Conan in all but name. When I watch the movie, I just sort of pretend Calidor is one of the aliases of Conan, kind of like Amra. He pretty much plays Calidor exactly as he played Conan in Conan the Destroyer. So you can, if you blur your eyes a little bit, think of this as an unofficial sequel to that movie. His appearance here reminds me of those few Robert E. Howard stories where the focus and point of view is on another character and how they see and interact with Conan. Those were always kind of interesting for a little bit of a change of pace to me. Now, of course, Arnold isn't in the movie a ton, and in retrospect, he isn't a fan of it after the fact. He has pretty much lambasted it as the worst movie of his career, and you can sort of see why. This movie seemed more like a favor or an obligation than a project he was passionate about. Still, he delivers a professional performance. Little did we know that this is really the last time we'd ever see him wielding a sword in the Hyborian Age. It's a real tragedy, in my opinion. On the level of Han, Luke, and Leia not ever appearing on screen together, despite the fact that it was possible in this latest sequel trilogy. Calidor is supposedly a lord in this movie, tasked with destroying the evil Talisman. So him helping Sonja is a natural, despite her initial reticence towards him. This type of character is the perfect type to introduce in the middle of an ongoing campaign, as a new player character or a replacement party member. Especially the type of campaign where the characters are chasing a MacGuffin. If for no other reason, watch Red Sonja to see Arnold's imperfect swan song to this genre. One of the legitimate, no excuses made high points of this movie are its sets. Queen Gedrin's castle is very imposing and a worthy sight for the finale of the movie. The castle and other sets really are eye-catching pieces that were designed by Danilo Donati. In fact, the visuals are a little more than the script probably deserves. This film is really let down by its very sparse nature as far as people go, like I said earlier. So a lot of these giant statues that you see in it are very imposing, but seem a little bit lonely and forlorn. Maybe that was the idea all along, I'm not sure. Now, I'm a fan of these types of visuals in general in my D&D games. Something that was probably pretty new here, but has been done since, is the bone bridge across a deep chasm. I'm still a bit of a sucker for that one. So, do you use these types of imposing monuments and statues in your games? If so, why not let me know in the comments below? While I can't answer every comment, I do try to read every one that I possibly can. Now, a world-ending talisman is nothing special in this genre, but the one here does have a few extra things about it that make it a bit more unique. The fact that it can only be touched by women, of course, fits the tone of the movie, where the main hero and the villain are both women. Now, if done today, we'd probably get a lot of cringy messaging on why men can't touch it, but here it's just the way it is, and it's not really dwelled upon after. The fact that it needs light to be more powerful produces a really cool visual in the movie of its room in Queen Gedrin's castle once she captures it, being filled with thousands and thousands of candles. Now, I don't know who was responsible for lighting or replacing all those candles, but they must have been busy little bees, that's for sure. The Talisman's wild and chaotic nature is kind of cool, too. But this is where the movie does sort of let you down. You never really see much of its power yourself, at least in the macro, in the world where Gedren is capturing these cities, other than maybe a few bad storms off in the distance. I thought they should have at least shown one city being destroyed by its arcane power. Instead, you just kind of see the aftermath. But generally speaking, this is kind of a MacGuffin that works and will probably always work in any kind of fantasy campaign. So much like the set design, the score of the movie really outperforms the rest of it. Red Sonja, as I mentioned, was made by Dino De Laurentiis, and he was able to get the legendary Ennio Morricone to do the soundtrack. Morricone, of course, scored many of the classic spaghetti westerns, as well as numerous other movies. His work here always adds a jolt of electricity to a scene, much the same way that John Williams elevates the drama in the original Star Wars, as did Basil Poldaris in the original Conan the Barbarian. Now, not that Red Sonja is anywhere near Star Wars or even Conan the Barbarian. I just say that to emphasize how important a score can be to a movie's success. Obviously, Morricone's work here couldn't overcome the movie's other deficiencies, but it wasn't through a lack of effort on his part. He put in a very capable performance with the soundtrack, and it shows. As far as the other characters in the movie, there aren't too many of them, but I really did like Ronald Lacey as Queen Gedren's chief advisor, Ikal. He, of course, played the villainous Arnold Tott in Raiders of the Lost Ark. I found it very funny that somehow his character here meets a worse fate than he did in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and that is saying something. My only complaint here is that there wasn't enough Ikal. They should have given him a little bit more screen time. There's also Queen Gedren's court wizard, who sort of looks like a DJ, mixing spells in real time for his boss. I really kind of like this approach to magic, and I didn't even mind the joke that probably landed with a thud to most people. I'm referring here, of course, to the one where he's trying to scry for his queen as to where the heroes are, and he accidentally forgets to erase his browser history. There are two other side characters that I didn't quite view so favorably. There's the child prince, Tarn, and his faithful servant, Falcon. They're the last survivors of Hablock, the prince's city that was destroyed by Gedren. I get some Cousin Oliver, Scrappy-Doo vibes from Prince Tarn. He's not strictly comic relief, but you do at various times want to see him get smacked around just a little bit, just so he shuts his mouth. His servant Falcon, played by Paul Smith, who was also the terrifying prison guard in Midnight Express, is a little bit more palatable. He's mostly silent and endures the humiliations of his child boss with dignity. Falcon could be, in many ways, the perfect henchman, loyal to a fault. He even gets to do a little action when the gang goes into Gedren's castle in the finale. Still, while they add a little bit of color to the movie, it would have been a better film if they had concentrated solely on Conan and Sonja's relationship. Maybe just those two going in together at the end to try to foil Queen Gedren. A lot of screen time was wasted on Tarn and Falcon, and I didn't think it was for much of a payoff. Now, Sandahl Bergman does an okay job as the villainous Queen Gedren, but it's kind of hard to buy her in this role after she played Valeria in Conan the Barbarian. Natural comparisons to Sarah Douglas from Conan the Destroyer are bound to be made, and I gotta say that Douglas was just a little bit better as the evil Queen Taramis. Douglas seemed to really relish the evil nature of her character, while Bergman seems to struggle with it a little bit here. Still, the design of the character itself is pretty good. She does look the part, and the Phantom of the Opera style mask is a good way to get what they call in wrestling cheap heat. Now, Bergman is, of course, physically gifted enough too, so the fighting scenes are pretty competent, but there's just something missing in her performance. Have you guys ever used someone like Gedrin as the villain in your world? Did you give her a mask or a pet spider? Ooh, that thing was nasty. Let me know, and also let me know what you thought of the movie, too, if you've ever seen it or if you're going to see it. Was it as bad as the critics said, or is it a bit of a guilty pleasure, kind of like it is with me? Either way, I'd love to hear what you have to say. Remember also to join us every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for The Lair. That's our weekly live stream where we interview interesting people, talk about news of the day, goof around, and even do a little bit of live play at the end. We'd love to see you there. All right, well, that's all for now. You guys have a great, great rest of your day. And until we talk again, goodbye.